Hello and welcome to the Fully Charged Show podcast. Now, before we begin this particular episode, I just want to ask those of you who've not subscribed to us to please do so. We promise we won't let you down, and there's tons of more exciting things that are going to happen soon on this podcast channel. So don't miss out. Subscribe now. Go on, do it, and download tons of organic, juicy, clean tech goodness into your lug holes. I should explain the word lug holes. It's not rude, I promise you. Lug holes, I think it is lug holes, is a very old English term that my grandmother used to use to describe children's ears. So it's your ears, your ear holes. Lug holes. I have no idea where that came from. Anyway, Maddie is presenting this particular talk, which was recorded at Fully Charged Live. Now, she's recently moved house, and I have been in touch with her a lot, and as well as that being a total logistical nightmare, which none of us would wish on anyone, what she's trying to do is make their new home having as small a carbon footprint as is possible. So with that in mind, Fully Charged Live in June, she wanted to ask some industry experts about all the options that she has at her disposal, and to be reassured that it's not as daunting a task as some might think. So we managed to convince Dean Fielding from Keystone Homes, Toby Morris from Sunamp and Martin Allman from Sonnen into the Mega Theatre to talk with Maddie. And this is what they said.
Hello everyone, we are just going to start because the Mega Theatre is already packed. Thank you all for joining me. I'm actually a bit of a newbie to the Fully Charged team, so it is a pleasure to be here. I cannot believe what Robert has created. It is very impressive. But yeah, thank you for joining this panel. This is Make Your Own Eco Home or Retrofit Your Own, and we've got a wonderful lineup of panellists today. So, has it smashed? I keep doing this. We're all good. Okay, so our panellists are, we've got Dean Fielding from Keystone Homes, round of applause please. Toby Morris from Sunamp, and we've got Martin Allman from Sonnen. Actually, when it comes to making your own eco home, or retrofitting in fact, there are so many complications. There are quite a few barriers of entry which don't make it easy. Yet people are interested, people want to do it anyway. Do you want to kick this one off actually?
Yeah, I think in some ways, you could get hung up on some of the policy challenges at the moment, where you've got a lack of government support to enable homeowners to adopt some of these measures, which is frustrating, as we're sort of bogged down in this Brexit paralysis. But in spite of that, it's really, really exciting times, because people are adopting these measures, not just because they're eco-warriors with a big bushy beard and sandals. They're doing it because it's the right thing to do, and it makes sense, and it makes your life better. It's really, really cool technology, and that's really exciting.
Yeah, Helen actually just said over in the Giga Theatre, you know, we're using the term eco-home, but these are just normal homes. Like, this is what housing should be like, or could be like.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And it also means that with technology getting better, getting smarter, it means that every one of us can manage and get our energy in a completely different way. Now, using an app on our phone to decide when we heat our house, how we manage the energy, looking at when we're consuming electricity or heat, and having a completely different relationship than just the old way of dealing with your supplier and paying your bill.
So people, the public, are clearly interested. They want to know what it is they can do. But I think there are lots of myths about things being really expensive or completely just not possible for them. So let's try and bust some of those myths and find out what we can do to our own homes. If I'm interested in making, let's play a bit of a grand design thought experiment. So I want to make an eco home or retrofit my current one. What is the first thing I can do without spending money? I don't want to invest anything yet. Is there anything I can do just to kick things off?
Okay, so if you're wanting to retrofit the current home, one of the very first things that you can do without spending hardly any money, hardly any carbon footprint to it, is just to do something called an air test, which is something that you have to do on all new builds now anyway, but you can do it on any home. It's quite a fun thing to do. You seal up your front door, put a huge fan in there, and they just suck all the air out the house and measure the pressure difference between the inside and the outside. And it costs a few £100 to have that done. And you can walk around the house while they're doing it, so you can see where all the carpet's flapping near the skirting board, where you've got a really leaky bit. And basically what that does is you can seal up all the drafty bits. Thank you, I'm not used to this. You can seal up all the leaky bits, which when it's cold, that's one of the worst things that happens with all the heat. Basically, the aerodynamics of the house causes low pressure areas, and it just sucks all the warm air out of your house.
It does sound a little bit sci-fi, but the idea of this is just to find those leaks, find the gaps.
Find the leaks and plug the gaps, and it costs you like a few tubes of sealant or a bit of rock wool. It costs you next to nothing. It makes a really big impact.
Okay.
And it also has a big impact on energy prices. So a really interesting little thing if you want to look back through it. When we had the beast from the east last year, electricity prices went sky high, partly because it was cold, but not only cold, but cold and windy. So everyone's boilers were trying to warm air up that was -6 up to 21 degrees, and then it was getting sucked straight out of the house again.
So you would suggest before investing in anything, before parting with your money, actually maybe a few tubes of sealant could actually do you some wonders.
Make a really big difference.
Okay, all right, well that's good to know.
And it's kind of pipes and light fittings and things like that are the easy kills.
Let's move on now. I'm now walking around my house. Let's think about fabrication and foundation, so the body of my house. Is there anything I can be doing to insulate it, to make it more energy efficient? Do you want to talk about insulation?
Well, yes. I mean, I suppose that ties into the same stuff you're saying. There's been a huge push over the years to initiate new technologies and how we generate energy. Obviously, there needs to be more of a push now in terms of using that energy efficiently, whether that's through technology, but as you say, through making your house more energy efficient. We've all been had letters through the door about installation, and gas companies are doing that for us on a daily basis now. So that is also catching up, especially now with things like the feed-in tariff disappearing. How we use the energy internally is absolutely vitally important, and providing people with that flexibility in terms of the technologies we offer is very important.
All right, then, well, let's talk a little bit about technology. I'm going to go upstairs and head up to the roof. So let's talk about solar panels. Who here has solar panels on their roof? Okay, a lot of people. And who here is really interested but just doesn't really know what's going on yet? Okay, all right. So I want to put some solar panels on my roof. How do I go about doing that? And are there any limitations, depending on the home I live in?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that you need to put them somewhere. So ideally, you've got a roof or something that can be orientated the right way, anywhere through east, west, through south facing. But most homes can fit into that category. I think one of the challenges, without going back into the murk of politics, a lot of people who've invested in PV before, they did it because of the feed-in tariff. Where it became almost about generating money as much about generating electricity.
Can I just stop you, and can you explain that feed-in tariff a little bit, just for anyone who's completely new to it?
So back in 2010, 2011, the government launched this incentive program, which basically meant that every kilowatt hour of electricity that you generated through your system, you got paid by one of the energy companies. And back in the day, back in 2011, is there anyone here who installed back in pre-March 2012. So these guys are getting around about 50p for every kilowatt hour that they generated. They're loaded. I mean, go and get a coffee off them. They're making a fortune, making about $2,000 a year from their solar, which is brilliant. Now, back in those days, they would have paid a lot more money for their system. So that was kind of makes sense. And what happened then over the next few years is that the feed-in tariff rates dropped. And it was kind of, the way it was handled was hard work, because you ended up with this sort of boom of the industry, followed by a bust as the tariffs were cut, and everyone thought, well, let's forget about that. And then the market recovered, and you go again. Now, that kind of moved forward, and finally, at the end of March, the government killed the feed-in tariff altogether. So there is no incentive from the government financially to do it. But the prices of PV panels, the prices of batteries to go with it, have come down significantly. And so I would say that because I work for a company that makes batteries, to get that in first. But really now, anyone installing a PV, it's not about generating money through a feed-in tariff, it's about generating electricity and then making the most of the electricity that you're generating. And the way to do that is to use things like battery technology or diverters that can heat up your hot water so that you're optimizing your consumption of solar energy.
And I think that's the key here, that actually the investment into some of this eco-tech is connected, and everything has a knock-on beneficial aspect to it. So even if you are investing a lot of money at the start, actually you're gonna benefit later on. Talk to us a little bit more about batteries. So you've got solar panels on your roof. How does having a battery in your house make that better?
So for a lot of people who have solar installed in their house, and maybe they're out at work all day and there's no one at home, so obviously when you're generating the most solar energy during the day, you're not using it, which means you just lose it to the grid. Now that's okay if you're getting paid loads of money and those guys are getting 50p a unit. Who cares? You know, they're minted. But you know, now it's about how you can use that energy as best as possible, and that's what a battery enables you to do. So in its simplest form, it's about capturing the energy that you're generating in the day, storing it in your battery, and then use it in the evening or the next morning. So, and that's the simplest form. What you're then getting with battery technology is added functionality. So, for example, if you wanted to use your battery to charge on an off-peak tariff, so it could be an economy 7 tariff that gives you cheap electricity between 12 and 7 in the morning. Other energy suppliers, some of them here today, they've already got, our friends at Octopus over there, they've got a flexible tariff, cheap electricity from midnight to 4:30, I think, or 12:30 to 4:30. So the idea is you've got to buy from the grid sometimes because you're not going to get everything from your solar. So when you do buy it when it's cheap, and then store it in your battery to use when electricity is expensive.
Could I just ask you to give me a rough sort of like amount of money? Like how much would it cost to put solar panels and a battery in a terraced house with 2 bedrooms? Okay,
so the cost of solar varies considerably depending on the size of the system. But if you went on a 3-4 kilowatt peak system, the average size in the UK is just over 3 kilowatt peak, I think. But a 4 kilowatt peak system now, for a good quality system, perhaps looking at around about £5,000. But then you've got different options. So you might want to have some nice, sexy in-roof panels that look a bit cooler. You can get high-efficiency modules that again, just give you a bigger bang for your buck. You've got different options with inverters that can mitigate against shading. And then when you start thinking about battery technology, again, it's another cost, but it gives you greater rewards as part of it because it's about optimizing the energy that you're generating.
Okay, so in an ideal world where I can afford to invest in solar panels and batteries, I've now got some energy and some electricity being stored in my home, so I can use that to run my house on during the more expensive times. So that's all good. But continuing with my thought experiment, I now want a hot shower. What can I do? How can I get hot water in an eco-friendly way?
You install a Sunamp, that's what you do, basically. So we're talking again about batteries. I suppose for each household, we all live in different ways. We could have 10 different or 10 exactly the same houses. We would use the energy differently. We all live in different ways, as I say. So you have to look at what your energy demand is. Is it going to be your heating and your hot water? Is it your appliances? And choose the technology accordingly. Obviously, from a Sunamp perspective, we take electricity or any spare heat, any spare energy, and store that to be used for your heating and your hot water. So for a shower, you can use that PV, charge it during the day when you're not there, you get home at night, or in the morning, you've got all of that hot water available.
I'm going to stop you there, just so we can all sort of get on the same level. What is a Sunamp?
So, I'm glad you asked.
Yeah, it's fine.
A Sunamp battery, we use what's called phase-changed materials. Sodium acetate, salt and vinegar. You can charge up this phase-change material using electricity or spare heat, any energy you've got.
I've actually seen a video which Sunamp did with Robert, and phase-changing material, I think the best way to describe this is, you know those hot hands?
Yes.
Is that right? You know those hot hands that you can kind of snap, and then they go, then the liquid material becomes solid, and then it gets hot? You know those? That's kind of what we're talking
Yes,
about. So you've got a pack of those.
Yes, well, it's sort of we have these batteries boxes filled with the phase change material, and the way it works is when you melt this material, it effectively starts to store energy rather than just heating up like water would. It starts to store it, and it will store it indefinitely until you cause it to re-solidify. And when it does re-solidify, it releases that energy in the form of latent heat, which you can then use to heat up or provide your heating, or to use or to provide a nice hot shower.
So how does it connect to your hot water system?
So within the battery, you have two circuits. One circuit is your mains water comes in cold, comes out hot at mains pressure. You've also got another circuit which goes through the battery, and you can connect it up to a gas boiler or an air source heat pump, whatever heat you've got, and that'll slowly charge up the battery. Or you've got an electric element which you connect into your PV or on the grid, and you can charge it up using off-peak tariffs or whenever you've got PV available. So what it does do is provide you that flexibility in energy source, so you can really start to reduce your energy costs.
Is it possible to have multiple types of battery storage in a home?
Yeah, there's various different types of... You're storing energy, and it can be in the form of electricity, like with the Sonnen batteries. It's in the form of electricity, like the Sonnen batteries, or the form of heat, like the Sunamp.
Because they're both connected to solar panels, so that's entirely possible.
Yeah, and of course there's also there's solar PV, photovoltaic for electricity, and solar thermal. And then there's obviously, you can have water storage, you can have heat exchangers, heat pumps, waste heat recovery. There's so many ways we can use the energy far more efficiently, get coefficients of performance from heat pumps. In fact, that's one of the things that with this eco houses project, these Keystone Future Homes that we're working on, we're hoping to absolutely smash the price of gas in terms of cost per kilowatt hour. So we can use completely off-peak electricity, either self-generated or off-peak times like the Octopus tariff, for example, at around a cost of between 5 and 6p a kilowatt hour. And then we can run that through a heat pump or store it in one of these systems, use that at a later time, and running through the heat pump gives a coefficient of performance of 4. So for every kilowatt of electricity we use to run the pump, it pumps 4 kilowatts of heat into the home. So we've suddenly managed to absolutely smash the price of gas, so we don't need to do fracking anymore, which is great, and we don't need to burn anything anymore. And it's clean and cheap, to use Robert's phrase. And basically the cost of gas per kilowatt hour is around 5p a kilowatt of heat after you've done with the losses, and we can achieve a cost as low as 1.25p per kilowatt of heat with this integrated design system.
So for anyone who got lost in the numbers there, if you were to summarise that in a nutshell.
I can't do that, I'm sorry. I think it'll save you a lot of money. It'll save you a lot of money on your energy bills, and you don't need to burn anything. So you save money and save the planet.
I think just as a general point, and I kind of worked in the renewables industry for about 14, 15 years, and I think one of the challenges for businesses is to try and make this a bit more simpler, so that people can understand what we're talking about, and you know, I can talk forever about lithium iron phosphate and about depth of discharge and all sorts of exciting stuff about batteries. But it's like, well, so what? Well, what's it actually going to do to make my life better?
Yeah, I understand things in terms of hot hands. Like that's kind of the level I'm operating on.
I think what you get out of it now is that there are some real simple solutions that people can do that are cost effective, that improve the way that they have their lives. Their homes are a nicer environment to be in, reduces their carbon footprint, saves them energy on the bills, protects them from future energy price hikes. They are good people because they're not damaging the planet. All of these things are important, and it's cool.
And they're all here.
It's sexy. Some of it's actually quite sexy stuff. It's cool technology. Love it.
Didn't think I'd say that about insulation, but there we go. I just did a Robert. I just rubbed my... If you notice, he does that all the time. He does this. Oh. Anyway. Wow. Okay, so there we go. So we've got hot water. We've got solar panels on the roof. We've sucked all the air out and made sure we don't have any gaps in the windows. So that's great. I quite like gadgets and gizmos. I just thought it would be quite fun to find out if there's any cool emerging tech that, you know, that maybe people haven't heard about before, or that you think is really awesome? Maybe apps that help you to manage all of these multiple systems?
So on the battery side of the house, the electricity side of the house, I think what you're going to start seeing is a lot of the big guys from energy companies getting involved in offering solutions to you, which is good news because they can reach out to lots of customers. One of the real technology advances that you're going to get is if you imagine not just one battery in your home, but thousands of batteries all connected to the internet that can then be connected into what we call a virtual power plant. So not directly wiring electricity and sharing electricity.
Community energy.
It's like a community, yeah, exactly. So it's a community of owners whose systems are digitally connected together. So all of a sudden, you're not talking about individual kilowatt hours of battery storage. You're talking about megawatt hours that can then generate additional revenue by supporting the local grid. So, for example, in those times where there's excess generation from wind turbines, which are sending electricity prices crazy, or where the network operators are having trouble supporting their grid, you can use batteries in people's homes to support that. And in turn, the homeowners get some money back, or they get some cheap or free electricity. And those are the models that are really going to start developing going forward. Really exciting stuff.
This is a really bizarre conversation for me to be in because almost to the day, about 10 years ago, I was involved in a program with Channel 4 called Home of the Future. I don't know if anybody saw it, but the idea was that they retrofit a home to be how they would hope it would be in about 10 years' time. And everything you guys are mentioning right now was bought up, was put into this house. Something that we haven't mentioned, though, was actually the way they were dealing with water in the home, not creating hot water, but actually managing wastewater. And I remember way back then, they thought all bathrooms should have urinals in them because actually, you're wasting a lot of good, fresh drinking water if you're flushing all the time and you don't need to be. But also they were rerouting grey water from things like your washing machine and the dishwasher out to the garden as well. I wonder if there are any water solutions that you guys knew about.
Yeah, so on the water solutions, on the Keystone Future Home, we've got a really cool kind of roof terrace area that can be used for rainwater harvesting, and it's completely gravity fed. So you don't need any pumps, because one of the problems with rainwater harvesting, it's a great idea, and it's brilliant because in the UK we use about 50% of all water that's been purified and cleaned to drinking water standard, we use to flush the toilet.
It makes
which is a bit of a waste. The other thing is that your average 3-bedroom semi-detached house in the UK has twice as much water land on the roof as it actually uses per year. So there's plenty of it around if you can capture it. The problem is with rainwater harvesting is it involves some heavy groundworks, huge tanks underground, pumps, filtration, purification systems and everything else to make that drinking water. So we've designed the house so that the water can be collected at high level, stored at high level in gravity tanks, and then used to flush the toilets. We've left the drinking water to the mains because it's just so cheap. It's not really viable for everyone to purify and have to manage their own water because it's really important, it's clean and safe. But yeah, that's the way that we'd be looking at rainwater harvesting.
Could you use irrigation systems as well to take that water out into the garden?
Yeah, so we'd use like an external tap, so you've got your really nice wildlife-friendly garden full of native species and everything, and you can use water which the plants love because it's not got chlorine in it, and it's just much better for plants, especially if anyone grows orchids. You'll know that they like rainwater.
It's niche.
A bit niche, maybe.
But that's so true, though. My dream home, my eco home, it's not just about the house, it is about the garden as well. So what other things could we be doing to attract pollinators?
Yeah, absolutely. So there was a really good program on Springwatch last week, and there was a lady, and I'm really sorry I've forgotten her name, but she did a great job. She bought this house, and she got what looked like an amazing garden. It was really lush and full of leaves and trees and all that, but she looked under the leaves and there were no bugs and there were no birds in the garden to eat the bugs, and they were all foreign species that just none of our native insects live on them. So she literally, it looked really harsh, she like ripped everything out and then just planted like native species, honeysuckle, hawthorn.
Bees love purple flowers.
Yeah, purple flowers, lavender. And it brought all the insects in, which brought all the birds in. She put a little pond in there, and it brought all, she had her own little a little hedgehog that was going to start nesting, looked like it was pitching up for having a family, and completely transformed the garden.
The hedgehog's got its eco home as well then?
Yeah, the hedgehog had its own timber frame, eco home. It was perfect.
Okay. And before we move on to questions from the audience, I just wanted to see if you had any final thoughts about eco home or retrofitting that we hadn't touched on yet. Was there anything in particular that you feel?
Yeah. So just one thing we've not really touched on, like the new build homes, and I just wanted to try and really quickly mention there's a bit of a problem there with new build homes, in that your options at the moment are very limited, unfortunately. Since the financial crisis, none of the mainstream banks support self-builds like you see on Grand Designs. So your only option is to either have best part of £1 million available to do a fancy Grand Designs house, or go down to Persimmon, Taylor Wimpey and buy a regular house that's relatively expensive and inefficient to run. With the Keystone Future Homes project, we want to solve the climate crisis and the housing crisis, which is quite ambitious. But we've got a plan to do that. And in a nutshell, it's to keep the houses traditional and desirable, to use locally sourced materials, no concrete or cement in the build, lots of timber to lock the CO2 in there. So they're very desirable. The second point is to make the construction process clean, because construction's one major contributor to climate change. The third point, I'll keep it quick. Third point is energy consumption. So like I mentioned earlier, to keep it really clean and cheap. So the running costs, we've got loads of innovative ways to do the arrangement, the solar panels and all sorts, to keep that cheap. The fourth thing, the final thing, and one of the most important part, is to lower the barrier of entry. So the model at the moment, if you want to make your own new eco home, you need to find a plot of land, pay an architect to design, an expensive. It's going to be a one-off. It's going to be expensive. You need around £600,000 to do a large self-build. You need to put the full cost of the land in up front in cash, 30% of the build cost, and then pay 2 mortgages until it's finished, and then eventually move in. The model we're going with is we would take a £60,000 deposit, we'd sign a contract, we would buy the site, build the house, and then you just move in and get a normal mortgage when it's finished.
Okay.
So we've lowered the barrier of entry from 600 to 60.
I'm going to stop you there, because I think if there is anybody who is interested in doing this sounds like a wonderful way of getting into it, but please do talk to Dean afterwards. Now, though, I do want to make sure we have some time for questions from the audience. So I think so if you're going to help me with the roaming microphone, amazing. Okay, any questions for our panellists, please, about retrofitting your own... Oh, good luck.
I live in a 600-year-old house in Somerset that's probably the draftiest place you've ever been. And I love the idea of doing a leakage test, because I think it'll take about 2 weeks to stop them all up.
Buy a few rolls of rock wool before you start.
Yes, my biggest concern is it's listed, and it's about time some pressure was brought on the government to say, we've got to do something about putting solar panels on listed buildings, which I would love to do. Do you have any experience of trying to get around listing problems?
I completely... going back about 12 years ago, I got some money for my local school to install. At the time, it was about £40,000 worth of solar, which was solar PV was going to be installed for free. And infuriatingly, the local parish council refused to allow it to happen on the grounds of aesthetics on an old. And so this is going back, say, this must be 10 years ago. And it's really shocking that local authorities and the government as a whole are not pushing this along and enabling people to do things which, this isn't freaky, weird technology. This is mainstream technology that makes your homes better, that saves you money on the bills, that helps the climate and does lots of good things. And I would urge you to push wherever you can. If you've got the time and the inclination to write a letter to your MP, just do it, because they need a kick up the butt. They really do. I don't have an answer because there isn't one, I don't think.
Thank you very much for that. And any more questions?
Perhaps a question for our friend in the middle there. Is there a way of dealing with or storing heat from solar gain within the house for use at a later date?
Yes,
There
yes,
is.
exactly that. So with the phase change materials, you get your excess PV. It goes into a filament in the bottom of the battery. It charges up that phase change.
Yes.
So you're powering it through electricity from your PV, heats the element, heats the phase change material, which then stores that heat until you need it.
Yeah. So yeah, I've got an answer to that. So the house has got like thermal management effectively. So if you get in the winter, the south-facing wall gets nice and warm from the sun. We vent the house through that cavity, and then it goes through a heat recovery device to pump the fresh, clean air into the house once it's been filtered, and it recovers the heat from that and uses thermal management to try and recover heat and suck heat back into the house, and it's kind of properly thermally managed to capture that heat. Yeah.
Very smart ventilation solutions there. Okay, any more questions?
Just a quickie for Toby. Could you tell me the efficiency of the Sunamp system?
Regardless of size, they're all A+ rated. So typically you'll lose about 0.7 kilowatt hours per day. You compare that to an equivalent cylinder, you're looking at 2.5 to 3 kilowatt hours per day on the newest cylinders out there. So if you were to charge one of our batteries and then just to leave it, it would take 2 weeks for it to run out. Yeah, so it is incredibly efficient and hugely compact.
Hi. Are all solar panels made in such a way that when their lifetime is up, that they can be reused again? Or is it a concern that when their lifetime's up, that it's just scrap metal and that's going to end up in landfill, or I don't know, what happens to that?
Thanks. With regards to PV panels, and actually there's even more of a pressing issue with batteries, because you've got lots of lithium ion that's been installed in people's homes, and even more so in people's cars. And there's going to be a real challenge as we move forward as to what you're going to do with these with batteries and solar panels. So within the solar panel industry now, there's organisations which have been developed. One called PV Cycle, which will take end-of-life panels, and that could be a 2-year-old panel that's been fallen off a roof or been damaged somehow, or it could be after 20, 25 years that will recycle these panels. And it could be about reusing them. There's a lot of stuff that gets sent over to developing countries for kit to be used where it still has a life, because it doesn't just sort of stop at the age of 25 when it hits the end of its warranty. It will carry on being useful. And then you're right, some of it is about taking out some of those materials as well, where it can't be reused. I think generally speaking, like any new or early stage industry, it's up to industry to find solutions, and also obviously with government to drive that forward as well. And I think it's going to be really interesting, particularly on the battery side of things, because it's a headache for particularly car manufacturers, where they're under a lot of pressure to work out how to recycle these batteries that are going to be used in their cars, and they've really got to step up to the plate to find solutions, I think.
There's some really exciting stuff that Helen Chertsky mentioned to me yesterday as well, about using things like mushrooms to extract rare earth metals from all these things, and innovative recycling techniques for batteries and solar panels and things like that that's been developed as well. But as they're all lasting a long time, they're not really required yet, because they're all lasting longer than everybody expected, like similar to the batteries really.
I'm so sorry, but we are going to have to stop the questions here because we're running to quite a tight schedule. So I would love to thank our panellists, but also I'm sure we will try sort of mill around this area if anyone's got any specific questions for anyone. That would be wonderful. So can we please put your hands together for Dean, Toby and Martin. Thank you so much.
that was excellent. Thank you so much, Maddie, for doing that. And don't forget, those of you in the United States or who want to travel to the United States, Fully Charged Live USA is happening on the 1st and 2nd of February 2020 at the Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas. And tickets are available in the show notes, or if you're thinking of watching this on our second YouTube channel, Fully Charged Regen, the link is at the end of this video. You can get tickets at fullycharged.show. Thank you to our Patreon supporters. You know by now how utterly, insanely invaluable you are to us. We will never take you for granted. So thank you times a million. And if you are interested in becoming a patron, then you can follow the links in this show notes. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star rating if you want. You might only want to leave us a 1-star. Totally understandable, but 5 would be nice. And review us on your favourite podcast player, as it helps us get discovered and gives us this thing that we all desire in life, credibility. So as always, if you have been, thank you for listening.